Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. We have in this session, we collaborate the BCS Consultancy Specialist Group with the BCSWomen Specialist Group. We have from BCSWomen quite a wide, abundant name of panelists. We have Joe in the room with me, but also we have the current chair of BCSWomen, Andrea Palmer. We have a previous chair of BCSWomen and current BCS president, Gillian Arnold, and also we have the previous president of the BCS, Rebecca George. And I think we have an additional last minute candidate, which is Tricia, panelist, which is Tricia Phillips. Welcome, everybody. We will have a round of brief introductions, but yeah, just want to welcome everybody. All right. Thank you.
Well, thanks for the introduction, Antonio. I'm going to facilitate the session today, but I will start with some introductions, and maybe Joe, as you're in the room, I'm going to start with you. If you could give a quick introduction about who you are and your role in consultancy and how you got there, please.
Yeah, thank you, Andrea. It's hard to know where to look with everyone on the screen behind. So my name's Jo Stansfield. I'm co-chair of BCSWomen, along with Andrea, and a member of BCS Council, and recently elected as a trustee as well. In terms of consulting, I've been running a consultancy for the last 2 years. It's called Inclusioneering. It's a social enterprise, helps tech and engineering firms who are looking to support their workforce, be more equitable, inclusive, and diversify their workforce. But also look on the other kind of side of the equation as well, in terms of the impacts of what they're doing, in terms of products and services and operations on the communities that they're serving. So I got into consultancy after quite a long career as an employee, making industrial software. And essentially what's got me to start off my consulting firm is I want to work much more broadly. I want to work across an industry and support more organisations with the things that I've learned through the career that I've had. So, very much driven to have that variety and portfolio of clients. So that's how I got started.
All right. Thank you. Thank you very much, Joe. Tricia, would you like to give?
Sure. Afternoon, everyone. Nice to meet you. My name's Tricia Phillips. I'm currently the managing partner at Cadence Innova, which I'm sure during the course of the next hour or so that we spend together, I'll be able to share more information about how on purpose we've created an environment which calls for diversity and really set out to make that change in consulting. My background is I worked in sales operations and found myself as a CEO in an industry that I'd worked in for quite some years. And as a kind of late bloomer, I call myself, I went to study. I took a master's in 2010. It took me 6 years to complete. And the driver around that was the rapid change in technology. And even though I was sitting in the kind of the pole position, as it were, I felt that I was losing sight and losing, I suppose, a grip on the tremendous change that technology was bringing into the world of customer and employee experience, and also those ethical dilemmas around AI and so forth. So I graduated in 2016. And during that time, I decided to go into consulting. So I was lucky enough to work with some fellow CEOs around how they introduce technology into their business to not just gain efficiencies, but really start to reimagine how services can be delivered using technology as the platform. So I wouldn't call myself a technologist, but certainly I'm a champion for using digital technology and kind of ensuring that we use that to best effect and to ensure that it doesn't take us backwards in terms of diversity and inclusion. And currently we focus on digital transformation in public services. So work across a broad range of central, local government and private industry to help them understand how they can gain that more kind of customer, and I include employees in that, gain kind of real traction around that level of engagement. So that's me. And I'm looking forward to this session as my first. So thank you for the invitation.
Well, thank you for stepping in as well. It's much appreciated. Gillian.
Hi, I'm Gillian Arnold, and I've got 40 odd years in the industry, which is shocking, really. I started when I was 17. About 20 of those were working inside IBM, but not as a consultant particularly. However, I was for a long period of time in technical sales, and I think there are some real similarities. Because there was a whole piece in technical sales around understanding the needs of the customer that you were talking to, and having a broad set of potential solutions for them, and being the person who listened honestly and ethically to the requirements, and then trying to match what was available to the requirements. So I think there are some similarities from my earlier career, but my real consultancy has happened like Joe, because I've got, for many of those 40 years, I was working on diversity in tech, and I'd noticed that there were issues. And so it's really then easy for me to support my customers now. So I run a company which does recruitment of diversity into tech, and we train because, like Joe, we recognise that whilst people might think that they want diversity, they don't always know how to go about it. And even when they do know how to go about it, they don't entirely get it. And so we help them to get it. Just like Joe. So now, yes, I would consider myself a consultant in that through the years of kind of acquiring skill on diverse hiring and diversity training within tech and STEM.
Thank you, Gillian. Rebecca.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I'm Rebecca George, and until May 2021, I was a managing partner at Deloitte, responsible for running Deloitte's public sector business across 25 countries. I had been at Deloitte as a partner since 2006, and prior to that also spent 20 years in IBM. Before that, I was a management consultant with a firm of chartered accountants called Spicer and Pegler. So one way or another, I've been in and around the consulting world since the mid-1980s. I would say, I would also say, I don't think I'm really a consultant. I've spent a huge amount of time with clients. Almost all of the time that I've spent with clients, especially in the last 15 years, has been around stakeholder engagement and problem resolution. In other words, trying to get people to get on with each other and trying to move projects forward when people are disagreeing about what they think they should do. And trying also to get people to focus on benefits and outcomes, and remember that the benefits and outcomes are the reason, one of the really important things about doing a consultancy project, but very rarely actually remembered. I think one of the things that I would say about why I like consulting is because it's always changing, and because the environment's always changing, the problems are always changing, then the people in it, the people doing it, are always changing as well. There's never been a problem that I've come across in a business which is the same as another problem in another business. There might be elements which are similar, but every single situation is unique. And that, to me, is endlessly fascinating. And as I have a pretty short attention span, it's been just great being able to move from one situation to another, learning from one and then taking the learnings into the next. Since I retired from Deloitte, I've taken on a role with the Department for Education, where I chair a board which is overseeing implementation of a huge skills reform programme. We have legislation in April 2022. This is a wholesale reform of the further education sector, looking at technical and vocational skills and qualifications, and really putting employers at the heart of the system. So, the idea is employers say what they want, and providers provide people with the right skills and experiences to meet those requirements for the future. It's an ambitious programme and absolutely fascinating. So I think that's probably all I need to say for now, and I'm looking forward to hearing what your questions might be later on. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Rebecca. I think, for me as chair of BCSWomen, just to give my background, I spent most of my career in technology, leading big technical delivery teams before moving into sort of more of the business change side of things. But what I can say in terms of Rebecca, every program is different because of the people. It's the technology may be the same, but it's the people that make the difference. And that's why it's never the same for any two projects. And after many years in the industries, I was made redundant and spent a bit of time away thinking about what I wanted to do, and I wanted to learn about different industries, and was given the opportunity to become a consultant. I'd hired people from this consultancy, Emphasis Consulting, when I was a client, and so thought it was a great opportunity to go in and learn. And I have been learning about different energy. I was in the energy sector before, but now I've worked with food manufacturing. I've moved working with beer. I've worked with telecoms. So in the short 18 months that I've been a consultant, it's been very varied, and I've learned a lot from that experience. So. Gillian, I'm conscious of your time that you've got. So, why
I'll keep going as long as I can.
Yeah, no problem. But I'd like you to explain why you may have to go, but also, why should people consider consultancy?
So it's so much fun listening to this. I was then going to have a look at, give me a definition of a consultant, because actually I think we all do all of those things, and consultants really broad as a role. And so, to Rebecca's point, incredible fun learning about each client that you work with. And just understanding how sometimes things get tied in knots, and it's about people, like you say. And Andrea, it's almost as though you need to be a psychologist along with everything else, because you've got to thoroughly work for people as well as the problem. Yeah. I think that's why I find it fascinating. And also, being completely honest, I love to spout about the things that I know. And so, it's really nice to, at the point at which you kind of go, oh yeah, I'm beginning to get it. I get where we could go here, to work the people and to be able to show that you know what's going on. It's really good fun.
Thank you. Tricia, why should people consider consultancy?
I concur with Gillian. I think it's a lot of fun. You get to kind of peek under the lid of all sorts of organisations and their gnarly problems. And I think when I was very young, I was called nosy. And now I get paid to be curious. We just changed the narrative, and then, and I think that's the thing. If you're really into problem solving, which, a lot of us are, and particularly in tech, you're fascinated by what it does, not what it is. It kind of is, you get to share knowledge, you get to learn. Every day's a school day, we say. And I think the other thing, it's quite a dynamic time to be in consulting, because you may be aware that they've introduced a chartership. So to Rebecca's point about skill reform, it's kind of happening everywhere. And for the first time, there's the chartership of management consulting. And I'm pleased to say that I'm one of the 788 people in the UK that has been already achieved the chartership, and incredibly proud of that, in the sense that it kind of has so many facets to it, and it's an opportunity to come into the industry now as it kind of enters a new phase. It's been around forever. I mean, I think the definition is to actually be a trusted advisor. And it's been around forever, but it's the first time that it's been recognised in terms of chartership. So it's a really dynamic time to come into the industry. I think, there's been a book published recently that kind of doesn't necessarily shine a positive light on consulting. But those of us in consulting would argue that actually those of us that come to this with ethics and with passion, it's not about the invoice, it's about the difference that you make. And fundamentally, at the other end of any problem solved is a human. And when we talk about women in consulting, 51% of the country is female. So we kind of can't lose sight of the fact that the service that we offer in that diverse thinking, when we come to the table as a diverse organisation, means that we can solve real problems in a real live environment, as opposed to historically taking a more kind of a technical approach and maybe a bias approach once upon a time. But it's a really good time because it's changing, and that's really where I saw myself imparting knowledge, being a champion for women in this industry, and that's kind of where I started and why it's a good time.
Yeah, thank you. Rebecca, were you going to say something?
I was gonna, because I agree with everything that Gillian and Tricia have said, but there were a couple of slightly different points I wanted to make for why I think consulting is so attractive. Actually, I've always taken a huge amount of joy and pride at making my clients successful. I all the years I was running the public sector business at Deloitte, my ambition was not to be in the press. I failed spectacularly, actually, at one point, but most of the time I kept Deloitte out of the press and kept our clients in the press for the right reasons. So we love to stand behind our clients and deliver really quite complicated technical solutions that solve difficult and complicated problems without anybody knowing. And I think that's important. The other thing about consultancies, I think there are many different definitions, as Gillian said earlier. In the world that I've inhabited for the last 15 years, the best clients are the ones which are the hardest, the ones which are very clear about, this is our problem. We are buying you because we want you to solve this problem, and we will pay you to solve it, and then you will leave. And typically those problems are situations where the client, for whatever reason, can't or shouldn't invest in those particular skills. They don't need them in their organisation long term, or they can't afford them, but they just need them to solve the problem. And I think actually having a really intelligent client who knows what they want and contracts in the right way, manages you closely and tightly and very firmly, and gets rid of you, that's the best for me. That's the best kind of client consultant relationship. And when that works, is magic.
Thank you. So, Gerald, I'm going to change tack very slightly now to look at how can we encourage more diversity and inclusion into consultancy. And, having read some of and been part of your research, what do you think the major blockers are?
Yeah, I think that there's challenges at all levels of it, really. There's coming up through kind of school and the expectation people have, what kind of career will I have? Women choose themselves away from IT and from consultancy because they're not seen as the kind of things that, people like us do. So there's that kind of expectation that's out there of, what kind of paths are open to me. It doesn't even enter the imagination, I think, for a lot of people. Then we find once women enter organisations, there are challenges to making that kind of progression and getting the visibility and the recognition for the work that they're doing as well. So there's very much kind of cultural things to be addressed within organisations about how they're recognising and rewarding and promoting women as well. So it's a multifaceted challenge. For women in IT, we have about 19% women in the IT industry. Depending on the stats you look at, I think the most recent BCS report was a bit higher, but actually since COVID and the changes in kind of return to work and flexibility are changing, it looks like that number's coming down again. So there's real challenges that women have in kind of flexibility and balance that really specifically impact women more than other people because of those additional responsibilities that we have outside of the workplace. So building an environment where women are actually able to make choices where they can do all of the things and balance those together is really important to actually enable women to really fully contribute and to be able to take part, to then, have their voices heard and reach those positions within the organisations they're in. So, lots of challenges, but lots of opportunities as well.
So I was just going to do a bit of a build on what Lisa said. And one of the things I tried to do at Deloitte, but I didn't succeed, was
You called her Lisa again.
I've called her Lisa again. Sorry, I do apologise.
It's all right.
One of the things I tried to do at Deloitte, but I didn't manage to achieve it, was I said, look, what we need to do is we need to bring in 70% of the people at the beginning of their career in those areas of diversity that we want to build. And if we have 70% when they start with us, then by the time they get to director and partner, we'll have 50%, or there or thereabouts. Because the fact of the matter is that both with ethnic minorities and also women, people tend to drop out of their career at the 7 to 10 year period for lots of different reasons. So I just think you need a lot more in the pipe at the beginning to give yourself more of a cushion to plan for later on. There isn't, there isn't a kind of easy way around the fact that consultancy does involve peaks and troughs of work. And when the peaks are there, it's really hard. Everybody's working really long hours. It can happen very suddenly. You can be stuck in a room for 48 hours trying to get a proposal out of the door. I've been there many, many, many times, and it's very difficult to manage that environment easily when you're also trying to manage lots of other things in your life at the same time. There are always people who will want to and can want to. I just think there are fewer women and fewer people of ethnic backgrounds who have the same flexibility, or maybe it's a social and cultural thing that men have. So I just think get more in the pipe at the start. Oh, and the other thing I'll say, because I can see Gillian waving her hand, I'll say it quickly, is men have to want to do it. Men have to want to increase the diversity. They have to hold each other to account. And if they don't, nothing will change.
Yeah, their unconscious biases kick in and want to select them. Gillian, now you're talking on mute.
Thank you. You're so right, Rebecca. And I constantly know how many women we get in our audiences, and I really wish that there were more men who wanted to listen. But I was going to echo what Joe said. Joe, I got it right.
Hooray, Lisa.
I think it's cultural. Part of consulting for me is having the self-belief that I know that I can support someone or a company through a phase that they're going through or a need that they have. And so for me, then, I have to have the self-belief that I'm good enough to do that. Now, if you're working in a culture which puts you down through micro behaviors, microaggressions, micro inequities, this constant chipping away at your self-belief because you're doubted more often than the male peers, or your answers are questioned, then because your self-belief is way out, you're in a more difficult position when it comes to trying to be or to believe that you can be a consultant to another organization. And the second thing I'd say is, I think women tend to be in the caring position more often than men. And I don't want to be sexist and exclude men who are carers, because I know that lots are. However, women do take on the burden of care more often. And that, as Rebecca was saying, is hard to juggle sometimes with a career that demands that you're away from home.
Yeah, no, I agree. Tricia.
I obviously agree with everything that's said. I think it also starts very early, doesn't it, in terms of how women select roles. And the research will show that, there's a 40% meet the criteria in the male world, and there's a 70 to 80% need for a female to apply for a job. And I think that research has been going now for many, many years. And then there's other barriers, such as probably overcome a lot through COVID, but when the recruitment process introduces things like video conferencing, and there are multiple barriers that we put in our way. And I think it starts with where are we reaching out to, how are we reaching out, and then the role models that are that close, because I think role models traditionally are out in the world, but actually people demand to see that in their organization. And I think I'm lucky. I work for a business that they set up on purpose 17, 18 years ago because of the experiences two of the females had in firms, where one was, they demanded she come back to work full time or not at all, with a very young child. And the other had been through so many mergers and acquisitions, she'd forgotten her own name. She was employee number XYZZ. And again, was asked to kind of really put aside her world in order to facilitate the organization's growth. So they set up to push down some of those barriers. And we're really fortunate that we're fairly heavily female orientated. I think we're certainly 3/4 of us at the kind of board level are female. So we play that role as a role model. But it's also challenging ourselves and keeping to challenge ourselves and our environment, our customers, in a gentle way, to say, really, in this world right now, how are we still talking about this? And where we talk about the barriers, I think they start really early. I think they start almost in, still the way that we approach what is pink and what is blue, if I can use those phrases. And we just have to change the narrative. And I mean, many of us are in consulting to do that, to actually start to continue that conversation through the generations, to say we should not still be talking about this. And, sadly we are. So, more and more of us are getting involved and getting into the conversation to create that opening to have the conversation, have the difficult conversation, and to be role models for others. I mean, I would be considered social mobility for many of the large firms now. I get the tick because I didn't have the education when I started. And I'm not quite sure how I feel about that. Actually, I'm really good at what I do. So why was it 20 years ago I couldn't actually break that barrier? Because I didn't meet a criteria that had been placed upon the industry that doesn't exist anymore. And it's really encouraging to see more and more firms start to move away from the concept that you have to fit a very narrow criteria. And as the smaller firms start to become the medium-sized firms, it's a really good, as I said before, it's a good time to explore multiple firms, small, medium enterprises as well as large, and see what fits you, because we're all slightly different. We try to be different on purpose. And I think there's a fit in the industry for almost anyone now who thinks they'd like a career in consulting.
Gillian, you're on mute.
I
You're
got
just-
all excited, and then I've forgotten what it was that I was going to say, but I got excited, and then Tricia said she would have been considered social mobility, and so would I. And I'm so glad that we're seeing the diminishment of those needs for, oh, you've got to have a 2-1, you've got to be these things, because I would have never have got here. So you're dead right. And the growth in things like apprenticeships and the growth in different ways into the industry is showing us how easy it can be from all different facets, and how people aren't just one fit, and how we can benefit from the diversity that we can bring in terms of innovation, or in terms of, kind of additional revenues or GDP.
And I think that leads nicely on to, the importance of qualifications and skills required now. In the past, we know that everyone wanted you to have got a degree, but there's a lot now on people who are doing apprenticeships or doing boot camps, and there are lots of questions also about some of the boot camps are just being set up by the government and just not actually giving them the right skill sets to actually enter the market. So there's a lot of questions that are going on out there. So I know Gillian and Rebecca have both been heavily involved in qualifications and skills. So I'd like to hear what you both have to say on what we should be doing to get into consultancy.
So I think this is a really important discussion about the fact that there are many different ways in. And I really hope that what we see is a societal shift, which says there are, 50% of the population don't go to university, and they all have the opportunity to take technical and vocational qualifications that employers want. I mean, most of them do today, but it's not articulated in quite that way. What we're seeing, however, is a shift or a leaning in towards the new qualifications around green energy, pharmaceuticals, civil engineering, nuclear, digital in all its forms. There are a plethora of new qualifications coming through, particularly around the T levels, which sit between A levels and apprenticeships. And I'm really hopeful that we will start to properly value people who are coming through the further education system with amazing qualifications and amazing experience. I spend a lot of time now in further education colleges, and I am so inspired every single time I go there. I see lots of women. I see lots of ethnic diversity. I see an awful lot of ambition. I meet people over and over again who say, I want a good qualification. I want a good job. I don't necessarily want to leave my hometown. And I think these are the most astonishing, amazing, inspiring people who will be our workforce of the future. And there are lots and lots of women. So it's really up to the employers, particularly at a local level, to reach out and say, we need you. We want you. And we're going to develop you and develop you as a career. And there are great examples. So EDF down at Hinckley, Siemens up in Goole, my own local hospital, the Musgrove in Taunton, all have feeder programs using, taking apprentices every year. And, I think there's a huge amount of opportunity there. And without banging on about it too much, there's also a role for people with academic qualifications too. It just might be, it's not 50-50. It might be that the academic end is a lower number than 50, and the technical and vocation is higher, as it is in other countries which are very digitally aware and have very high productivity. I'll stop because I could go on for hours. It's my favourite subject, but it's very important we get this right.
And to your point about the employers, I think we've got to shift some perceptions about, you're not good enough, or you're second rate if you've done certain things. And so, if we have a situation where you could be a graduate or you could be an apprentice, then culturally within organizations, we have to find a way to make those things of equal value. That you're not something special because you came out of university. You've just got a different set of qualifications, and you've had a different learning experience to somebody who's practical. And so a story from my past, where I started teaching technical stuff inside of IBM, surrounded by Oxbridge men, and feeling, and to Tricia's point, I was this lass who'd failed my A-levels and had completely flunked everything. But I started teaching at IBM, and within 3 weeks understood that the things that they didn't teach, that they didn't understand because they'd never had the practical experience. And I'd got 7 years of practical experience. And so those things were both equally valuable. And only when I'd kind of gone through that learning process for me, did I really see that there's a level playing, there should be a level playing field, whether you come from an academic background or whether you've got practical hands-on experience. Both those things are equally valuable, and we need all of the different facets of learning to make somebody a valuable, or to make a valuable team to support our clients.
Okay, Tricia, and then I'll come to you, Joe.
I just wanted to really pick up on the concept of apprenticeships, and our minds automatically turn to 18, 19, 20-year-olds. But actually, again, the skill reform, and historically in the last number of years, there's no age barrier. So actually, somebody retraining into the workforce,
so I
coming in is that we've opened up a whole new world, and I'm not sure we're vocal enough about how returning to work, whatever your circumstance, you can have both. You can have 7 years of practical, and you can open up an opportunity to, inside an organisation whilst earning, get exactly the qualifications that you feel might give you more confidence.
Well, I think that's where employers can also, with the skill shortage, look to retrain and cross-train people. You're right. I was in my 50s when I started my data science apprenticeship. I didn't complete it because I was made redundant, but that was beside the point. But I didn't do the exams, but I did the whole course. And so age isn't the limit. It's about allowing people to be given that opportunity. And I think so often employers go, well, I'll hire a millennial. Well, there aren't enough millennials to go around. But there's a whole workforce who've got huge amounts of experience that could actually benefit your company. And quite often it's about reskilling and upskilling the people that you've got within your organization, because the roles are changing. So you can't just dispense of them and say, I'll take a new person off the street. It doesn't quite work like that. And you should be looking to see how you can support them. So Joe, sorry, I'm
going to talk about a very similar topic about kind of retraining, kind of mid-career people returning to work potentially as well. That there's often a wealth of experience people have got that they brought from a previous career and a previous skill set. And actually, one thing I've really noticed actually from the work that we've done with BCSWomen supporting like the Tech Up boot camps, which retrains women into tech careers, is that there's quite an art actually in translating, these are my previous skills, and these are how I bring value into the new context that I'm going to be working in. So I think there's a bit of responsibility there on organisations to kind of help bridge that gap, actually, and to really be able to seek out, well, what skills can be transferred and how can we understand the value from that previous experience? It's definitely a bit of a disjoint that I've seen that, women are kind of coming through the boot camps, they've done the training, they've got a whole new skill set. And I think that's the only skill set they have to offer. But of course, they've got so much more. And actually being able to recognise that and really tap into that kind of experience that they have, I think there's a lot of value there that really needs to be seen. And there's a piece there for organisations to really pick up, I think, to understand how that can be brought in to their work in their new context.
I think we've got to break down some barriers as well around how old is too old to. So going further, Andrea.
Yeah, well, the retirement age is getting pushed out further and further.
I know.
And so we're going to all be expected to work longer. So,
I'd planned to work till I'm 70, but now I'm thinking that I could have another career. I have to say that I hide in my work in that I've got such a big caring responsibility at home that actually working, it keeps me sane because it gives me something else to think about. But yeah, I want to be something else now. And I was listening to some PhDs this morning and they were talking about the research they were doing on bias and AI. And I was thinking, I could do this now. This is what I could work on now. This would be fascinating. And so I think we do need a mindset shift, both those of us who want to continue into our early 70s, and those companies who feel that 50 might be a threshold and it's so not anymore. Yeah, Tricia, but traditionally, this is what we've seen, and when you see redundancies happen, whilst you perhaps could never say, oh well, they picked all the older people, they might say, well, we picked all the people who were paid huge amounts, and that's tantamount to sometimes the same thing.
Yeah. Or in my case, being on a final salary pension scheme.
I was just going to mention the pensions. I come from the age where women could say, I don't want the pension, thanks. And very early in my career, I signed out of a final salary pension because, it was better to have the money in my pocket now. And so we have an emergence of another issue, don't we? We're working partly because we want to, and partly because there's not much pot to look forward to. As to keep the lifestyles that we've made ourselves accustomed to.
I just wanted to go back to the kind of upskilling discussion, which I found really, really fascinating. I think that we have a real problem in the UK codifying what upskilling is. And the fact of the matter is that if you're in consultancy and you're successful, you're going to be upskilling all the time, because in every job that you do with a client, you're going to be learning something new. You're going to be evolving. You're going to be changing. You're going to be building new experience. But we don't codify that in a way, and we don't necessarily recognise it as skills development or even CPD. And that, I suppose, is one of the reasons why I think that the kind of professional accreditation that the BCS offers is so important, because it's a way of being able to codify what you're doing in your career, have that independently assessed by external people, and have it recognised. And I think if you're a consultant, it's incredibly helpful to be able to do that. My really big wish is that those people that commission consultants, I really wish that they would put in their proposals, we want to know the evidence that the people that you're proposing to solve our problem are properly qualified to do the job. There could be lots of different types of evidence, but we want to see that evidence. They never do. They never ask. And I just worry that there are lots of people out there who aren't qualified to do the job that they're being contracted to do. And there are lots of people who are more than qualified to do it, but perhaps don't realise it, or maybe it's perhaps generically a female trait, don't actually think they are really well qualified.
And that kind of comes back to the self-doubt thing that, you know, you do need to have a self-belief. And one of the ways you can achieve that is by having peers say, actually, you are okay. You do these things well. And so things like charterships, whether that's within the BCS or, you know, as a consultant, or the BCS fellowship even is a way of kind of allowing yourself to believe, because peers have judged you, that you are okay and that you can do the consulting roles that you're challenged to do.
I'd like to bring Jo in at this point, because you've made that leap now to set up your own company and to do that, and I know that it's taken you several years to actually do that, and be quite interested to hear what made you feel that you were finally ready.
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, in a way, it's emerged to some extent. You know, when I retrained, I had a career kind of building software for industrial stuff for about 20 years before I then retrained. I took a master's degree in organizational psychology to learn about the diversity and inclusion and the leadership and the coaching and all of the kind of aspects that go around supporting organizations to do that better. So I think that kind of proof and that credibility was really an important part of it, to know that actually what I'm doing is underpinned by like good practice and evidence. And actually since then, I've also been training in auditing AI systems, you know, so I'm an accredited auditor of AI systems. And actually those pieces all kind of add up actually to building that piece that I do have expertise in this. And actually starting on that journey, it's kind of interesting listening to you all and reflecting on it a bit, that you do have years and years of people kind of doubting you, and you've got to try that much harder sometimes, I think, to actually be taken seriously. And then actually coming in as a consultant, and you're somebody who's coming in as the expert and people have asked you in, you're suddenly treated actually quite differently. And it's a bit unexpected in a way. It's like you've got to kind of internally adapt to now being in that different position. And I think all of that kind of proof that I built up for myself actually really helped with that, and that I went in with more confidence. Actually, I do know what I'm doing. I'm kind of uniquely qualified for the things that I'm talking about here. And that helped me to believe in me, as well as I think helping that kind of credibility out there to people that I know what I'm doing as well. So I've been doing a bit of a double act for the last 2 years. I've been half-time employee, half-time consultant for my own business. So as in 2 weeks' time, I'm fully consultant for my own business. I've kind of taken the leap to, just running my own business fully. And thank you. It's very exciting and also very terrifying. I'm kind of oscillating between both positions on about a minutely basis at the moment. And what's kind of led to that actually is just getting enough work and getting enough busyness that I have to make a decision about it, in honesty. You know, I've come to a point where I have to choose, and this is what I'm really loving doing. It's extremely fulfilling. It's great to work with so many different challenges and be solving the problems and really be the person who's there solving the things that haven't been solved before and doing those unique projects. You know, it is kind of the obvious choice. You know, I have to do that one. So, you know, kind of circumstances sort of led me into, then making that decision to go fully for it. So
Thank you.
That's how it's all come about.
And I think, to Rebecca, is, what can we do to make sure that we get more women, into senior positions within consultancy? We've talked about that sort of peer-to-peer support, but how do we, a lot of people will say, pull up the ladder. After I've heard of women pulling up the ladder when they've got there and said, well, I found it tough to get there. So, you've got to work at it as well. But that's not really the answer to increasing the diversity and inclusions.
No, so I did say earlier, and I'll reiterate it because it's a very important point. In order for women to get on, they need men. They need men to help them. Gillian and I had an initiative, oh God, I don't know, 20 years ago probably, which we called the Leg Up Initiative in a very un-PC way. But the idea was that we would ask men to get involved in giving women some help in their career, whether it was mentoring or coaching or hiring or promotion. And we had some fantastic people, some fantastic men involved in that program. And several of them made a lot of very successful women. And most of the women who are senior in the business today are senior because men got them there or helped to get them there. So I think there's a huge amount of, there's still a huge amount of work that needs to be done to get men to advocate for diversity and hold each other to account for that. But the other thing I'll say is clients can ask, and they often do, and they should do that more often. I have been in a presentation to a client where we followed a presentation group of 15 men. We followed them into the room, and the client looked at us and said, "Did you see that? In this day and age, that is unacceptable." That was a male client. And I think that we also need to help our clients articulate that view. And they want people who look like them. And lots of our clients have lots of senior women, especially like me, working in the public sector. So, helping our clients to speak out, getting them to put things in proposals, in requests for proposals, actually calling it out. You need a more diverse team to solve our problems. I think that's another side of the coin.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. When I was a client, one of my colleagues was invited by a consultancy to Chelsea football ground to meet their top 100 talent. And he went, and he didn't stay very long because he said, "You're just showing me 100 men. I can't believe that you don't have any women in your top 100. And he left. I thought it was very brave of him to do, but I really admired him for doing it. And it's people like that we need to call it out. And I notice when we're bidding for work, quite more and more often clients are actually asking, why are you only presenting men? I want women. We want a diverse pool who are going to be working with us, because it doesn't reflect if it's just men. And I know that there are different sectors and things that attract more men than women, but we need it even within the consultancy. But there are people there, and you need to push back as well.
I think I've seen beginning to happen more as well is that investors and kind of funding is beginning to expect diversity and inclusion considerations too. So funding is often granted actually with some expectation around diversity and inclusion with it. And that's been kind of amazing actually in the organisations that I've been working with, that they then start thinking, well, how do we do it? And they start trying to solve the challenges that they start seeing that they have. So that's been a really powerful kind of change driver, actually.
Gillian.
I've got a role in Europe for women in tech. In Europe, they're almost streets ahead of us. There's legislation around the need to be inclusive, prove your diversity, prove that you're doing things. And they are starting to have quotas, not targets, but quotas around diversity, because they've seen that when things are somewhat but not overtly mandated, they get far better results than when we kind of go, oh, well, we'd really like you to. And so in this respect, because we're not moving fast, and because, and we were talking before we started this session, we were all talking about why are we still in this situation, and why has it been so many years? And I think that we will see legislation across Europe kind of helping them to be streets ahead. So, for example, in France now, in Germany, and this started with Norway, they are legislating for a maximum number of a minority group on boards. And we've not legislated in that kind of quota way. We've left it down to the companies. And so FTSE 100 are doing very well, okay, but they still don't have the executive directorships at board level. They have the non-executives, but not the executive females. And we need to, and you know, FTSE 250, there are still companies who are not playing the game at all. And FTSE 350, there's still, but this is 350 companies out of the million companies, the millions of companies in our country. So I almost think that in order to get those allies, those supporters, we need to give them a little extra nudge. And it's a bit radical to say so, because people think they don't like quotas, but actually there are places where quotas work. And we do need to think about this. Oh, shut everybody up.
No, I think it's a really important discussion, and I know Gillian, you and I were on a call with on diverse IT with some of the European companies, and it is really important. And my concern now is that maybe with laws and things changing, listening on the news this morning that we're getting to get rid of a lot of the European laws. Is that actually going to impact us?
Well, I think though it'll be an example to us, and we'll see ourselves, if we continue down the road we're on, we'll see ourselves as an outlier, because our numbers won't move at the same rate as those of others.
So
just want to mention that it's 7:30, so maybe we want to give later some time for questions online.
You've read our minds. Rebecca and I are saying yes, we need to ask people if they've got any questions. So maybe.
And I've logged in the bomb, and I'm going to go now. I'm sorry, but I do have caring responsibilities, and I'm neglecting them desperately. So
great to see you, Gillian.
Yeah, thank you very much for joining us today.
See you soon.
All right, bye.
Bye.
So, Antonio, do you want to ask if people in the room first, if they've got questions?
Any questions, people in the room? Gentleman in the back.
I don't need to stand up, do I? I can stand up.
Yes.
Stand up?
No, we can continue.
Vijay Panchanathan, good governance implementer of international standards. There's lots of food for thought there. A bridge between academia and industry comes to mind. That's one thought. Another is positive discrimination. People call it out as, it's positive discrimination. So maybe we need a methodology, a method that Europeans have adopted, a good practice. Maybe we could bring that along to this country. So there is a scientific way of achieving that without people, calling it out as positive discrimination. So they're the two key things that I picked up from the discussions this evening. I'd be interested in hearing how we can achieve those things from the panel.
One thing I'd say is that context really matters. So actually, when it comes to things like diversity and inclusion, it's quite hard to just cut and paste best practices from one country to another, because actually the cultural factors really make a difference. So one thing that I've seen a lot in kind of tech firms is that, kind of the Indian branch of the firm is way more gender diverse than the UK, for example. So in India, there's around about 35% women working in tech roles. So it's really different. But they have different cultural challenges, right? So it's still not fine for women in India. They see, different things happening as they're progressing through their career, and their kind of gendered expectations are different. So actually the cultural factors really make a difference. So while there is a lot that we can learn from our Indian colleagues, actually there's an awful lot that doesn't kind of directly translate as well. So I think that contextual understanding and kind of adapting to the culture that we're in is important. And I actually think that with the quotas, there's something about this going on too. Norway is a different culture from the UK. And the fact that their quotas are accepted there says something about the Norwegian culture as compared to the UK culture too. So I work with organisations that are industrial typically, so very male dominated, often very white dominated, very traditional businesses. People, on the shop floor with, kind of hot jobs with dangerous situations, and they're going through digitization and transforming their businesses for, the future and sustainability. But they've got very kind of old-fashioned attitudes, if you like, as compared to other parts of tech. Within those businesses, you try and give them a quota of a certain percentage of women, you will shut down all communication. There will be no acceptance. The women who are there will be treated with suspicion. They won't accept that they have made it there on their credentials, right? So there's all of these kind of cultural considerations about how do we actually communicate about it and build that support and understanding, within the culture that we're actually in. So, there's no easy answer, I think is what I'm saying. There's a lot that we need to understand and adapt within the context we're in.
Tricia, do you want to build on that?
Yeah, so I think there is some work being done, and working predominantly in the government sector and public sector. There's a lot coming through in terms of the larger opportunities where you're not just asked about your own ambitions and diversity, but actually how you manage that through the supply chain. And whilst it kind of early on embryonic stages around that, but there is a 10% weighting towards that aspect of any bid. And I think that's often where it starts. It's holding up the mirror. And as a buyer, we touched on it earlier, there is a real requirement for organizations to help where they spend their money. And, from a consumer perspective, we were already making choices. We're moving away from organizations who quite clearly are not supportive of the makeup of the world as it looks now, or even of the country as it looks now. And I think that's two sides to the same coin. And if those two sides of the coin actually continue to build on those ambitions, we will see a seismic shift, because you just won't get the work. And I think that certainly, from our government, from our local government sectors, they have a real responsibility to expect it and not to award work where there is clearly, an organisation who continues to sign up to the old way of the makeup of an organisation. And that's where I'd like to see a light being shone a little more to help us to make this change.
Thank you. Rebecca, did you want to add as well?
I was just going to say, it's a while since I heard the phrase positive discrimination. I kind of feel that we've been operating in a society which has had positive discrimination for the last 400 or 500 years, and it's positively discriminated for men, specifically white men. And it's worked really well, hasn't it? I mean, all of our institutions, all our processes, all our regulations and laws have been primarily developed by men and enacted by men. And it's time that changed. So I'm kind of, and maybe I can say this because I've retired from consultancy, mainstream consultancy now, but I think I thought it at the time. I'm actually really happy to be accused of positive discrimination if it's going to help women and ethnic minorities get on the ladder and get good jobs. I put an awful lot of extremely talented people into jobs in my career, and they flew. And I know they wouldn't have got those opportunities if I hadn't put them there. And it's a huge source of pride to me. Fortunately, nobody accused me of positive discrimination, but they perhaps might have done, because I would choose a candidate from a minority over a candidate in a majority if I thought they had the capability and they could fly. And I'm proud of that.
Yes. I think you should be proud of it, to be honest. Yeah, we've seen discrimination, not just in consultancy, but across the world, and even to the extent, when women used to play soccer or football many years ago, and then they were seen to be too successful, and it was banned. Yeah. But I mean, you can draw a lot of analogy from that into the workplaces where I'm coming from, and if men are making some of those decisions, then it's really difficult to progress. So we need to look. And I saw that Rafi had a question about what are we as BCS women doing, and the BCS, I would say, to try and get more women into consultancy is having joint events like we're having today, but we do lots of different activities to encourage women into tech in general, and I don't think it's just consultancy. I think that's the important part to you may end up in consultancy, but you may actually start off as a software developer in a consultancy. I mean, it is a very broad spectrum. You can't just say. So I think we're doing quite a lot of different activities, and also looking at how, by running different taster sessions about what it takes to be a PM, what it takes to be a business analyst and a business change person, so that people start to see what it is that it could be like for them, and sort of the qualifications and the skill sets. And for me, there are so many transferable skills that we have from life in general, whether it's from being a carer, from being a mother or whatever. People say, oh no, I've been out for maternity, and it's going, you've learned a whole load of project management skills when you have a child that you can then apply those things in the workplace. And if you can do that, be a parent, I think you can be a successful consultant personally, because it's about being able to juggle lots of different things at the same time.
We have Hector online who had some comments.
Okay. Yeah, Hector, yes, I've seen you've written in some comments. Do you want to talk them through us?
Yeah, as I said, I'm in total agreement that you basically you need male allies, because it's this thing where you basically preaching to the converted already. If you haven't got like this diversity, if you haven't got people of different colours, people of men, blah blah blah. So in a way, I'm in agreement with that, and I'm in agreement that you need positive female role models like yourself. You also need positive role models that don't have to be female. People need to be inspired by seeing that other people have done something, and it's just basically that. It's like I'm enjoying listening to what you've been saying, because you need to hear this type of thing so that you almost, it's like a reflex. You know what I mean? And I'm also,
you get lots of nodding.
Yeah, and there's also a certain thing where, to me, I was watching some. Well, actually, there's this thing on CBeebies which I've never seen before. It talks about people's careers, and it's the way that the people's engage with these youngsters, and there might have only been, and you can see the earlier you can get people excited about, well, things like technology. I say this thing where technology is a bit boring, whereas something like sport's exciting, and you've got to take the mystique out of some of these job titles we've got. So, but
I think there's another way that you can also spin it. So, sport has evolved as technology has evolved as well. And so nowadays, if you look at sports people, they all wear a little digital tag when they so you can see where they are on the pitch. You can tell how many times they've kicked the ball. All of this is technology and connected with sport. And I think it's fascinating to look at how the connections there, but people just think it's just a football match or it's a rugby match or it's cricket, but actually all the stats and things that are generated out of those things and the speed that the ball's being hit at is all linked to technology.
There is that.
But I think you need to highlight it as well, because people just think it's a match. Sorry, Tricia.
I was just going to say, I think that the appeal is also in what does it do. And I think we can often lose sight of. I was talking to somebody today, and one of the projects we're doing, fundamentally, the project itself is seen as technology. It's boring, Hector, to your point. Some of our teams are going, Bear, really? And actually, when you run the movie all the way to the end, what's actually happening is people who have a health issue are waiting too long as a consequence of what's currently being done, and the technology will speed that, which in turn brings down the levels of anxiety. Anyone who's waiting for a medical outcome, if anyone in this room has been there, it's the worst time. At least when you get the diagnosis, and you start to kind of engage with the system. And so when you articulate consulting in its outcome form, it's far more appealing than the actual job itself getting to the outcome. And I think purpose for me is something we should play up more, because often we can appeal to a very different audience who wouldn't want to make a difference, who wouldn't want to have a relative find out a diagnosis, positive or negative, in 2 days instead of 2 months. So when it's taken to that degree, the technology is just the enabler. And I think there's a lot more conversation to be had around that as it relates to consulting, as opposed to the machinations of the job itself.
Thank you.
We have a question in the room.
Yeah, I wanted to.
Was going to bring a question. Maybe come back to you.
I just wanted to say thank you for mentioning just the challenges of transferring your skills from, your previous career to consulting or IT. I think it's kind of, underestimated how stressful it can be. For example, I've researched Andrea. I don't know if she can hear me, but I completely relate to her background, because I have a background in psychology as well. And I just didn't feel good enough when transitioning into consulting. So that's why I wanted to prove myself. I'm doing my MBA, I'm doing these internships, but I just wanted to know any other advice that you have, taking these skills, and how do I demonstrate that it can be transitioned into a consulting role? How do I demonstrate that I am good enough? And thank you also, I appreciate you mentioning that sometimes women do feel maybe that they're not as good as their male counterparts, and I felt like that before. So I'm just wondering, how do I exactly demonstrate those skills? Anyone, it's open to anyone actually, not just Andrea.
So I think you're demonstrating by speaking up right now. I think that's showing that you've got the courage and you're starting to believe in yourself. So thank you for doing that. But I think it's also, you can to help you. We can get a mentor and sponsors. I'm more than happy if you reach out to me on LinkedIn, and we can have a more personal chat to just see how I can help you along the way. But yeah, it's about building your network as well, and having people, not just who you work with. It can be friends, it can be people that you reach out to on LinkedIn. Build your network is what I would say, because most jobs are actually through your network and not through the jobs that are advertised.
I completely agree with that, Andrea. In fact, I think the statistic is 80%. Yeah. I think 80% of all jobs are got through some kind of personal connection. So the thing I would add, I think building your network is absolutely crucial. But the thing I would add is, if you can, and I'm looking at the message from Clara as well in the chat, which makes me want to weep. But if you can, you need to try and get yourself onto a big, long-running program. And the public sector ones are great for this because they're big and they're long-running and they need lots of people as a contractor. Because what you kind of need to demonstrate that you've got the skills is you need to demonstrate you've got the skills, right? Which means you need to be on a program. You need to actually be doing a job. And you need to be able to build your CV. So there are lots of ways in. There are lots of organisations now which provide huge numbers of contractors into major programs, and will start to give you that sort of exposure and that sort of experience. So yeah, those are the two things. But really work that network, and BCS is good for that. You know, I can see there aren't that many people in the room, which I think is a real shame. But I think the more events you can go to and situations you can get yourself into where there are other people there and you can sit down and chat to them, the better.
Thank you for that. I think I have, so where I'm working now, we have a buddy system and we have a mentor system. And part of my induction is to reach out and build network. So that definitely is pertinent. But I think also for older, I'm in my mid-60s, and like some of us, you know, the plan didn't quite go as we had set it up. So I want to work, but I also need to work, and I'm really, really lucky that I have a 3-day-a-week job, which suits me. But it is that networking and that self-belief and that reinforcement of your skill set and your knowledge and your soft skills and transferable skills, and that tenacity that we have at this stage and age. So I felt confident. I didn't feel confident at the time, but I do now, to actually just say, okay, that one's not working, but
do this instead.
I can go somewhere else with these skills.
Yes,
you will find the right place eventually. That I do, yeah. But it is also think about where you could actually volunteer your skills as well, because through that volunteering, you build your networks and you build your experience. That will enable you to then say, look, these are the things that I've been able to do. And people actually, you know, if I'm looking to recruit someone, I would be looking for someone who is sort of entrepreneurial in their ways of working. And I can see Tricia's nodding, whether you want to add to that at all.
Yeah, I think there are more and more firms. I mean, certainly our firm, I would say we probably have 20% traditional consulting skills. And, you know, we see it as a USP that we've got lived experience underpinned by really strong methodology that we help people bridge from the core transferable skills into consulting. And our clients really appreciate that lived experience. And I think that as everyone has said, it's finding that step in and it's finding those role models. And most of the people that we hire kind of come to us and say, oh, you know, I'm an imposter. And we actually have a program that says, do you know what? Actually, there is research that shows that fuels you. That fuels you to keep asking the next question. And as consultants, it's our role to be curious and surface things that are currently unknown to an organisation and help them be known. And so we help our individuals coming in who, you know, rabbit in the headlights kind of experience to understand that they were chosen for their values and for critical transferable skills, which are problem solving, relationship management, some key things and some key themes. But you've got to kind of look, and using the network, as everyone has said, to find those organisations. But they exist, and they exist. More of them exist now in the SME market. Okay, but you know they exist. So you know, Cara, feel free to also reach out to me. I'd love to hear from you.
Thank you. I will.
The room. Do we have time for questions in the room, Andrea?
I think yes, we've got time for one more.
Okay, I run a company in digital transformations. And it was really awesome to listen to your experiences, Rebecca, Andrea, Tricia, and Gillian, and you as well. I forget your name. Oh, yeah, that's right.
Lisa.
Thanks for mentioning India, because yes, India has a more than normal gender diversity as far as the IT industry is concerned. And I'm very, what I would say, I will volunteer to bridge our Indian organization called NASSCOM. NASSCOM is the Association of IT Organizations in India, with BCS, for them to share this gender diversity, you know, how it is more than normal as far as India is concerned. But just to share with you the secret spice, it's essentially, it starts with the family. I mean, parents push their kids, whether boys or girls, into STEM, you know, and if they don't make it into medicine, then they go into engineering. I'll be honest about it. Ladies, initially, they are because of their empathy, because of their project management, all these skills that they have, they try to get into medicine. But if they don't get into medicine, then they jump into engineering. And you'll be wondering, okay, what's the difference between what's the similarity? There's no similarity, but it's just that both of them have STEM, you see? Okay, so they have come till their 12th standard, which is your A levels here. And after that, it's just that, I mean, this just continues. But the other thing I liked in this discussion was basically the transferable skills. And I believe in this. You know, I strongly believe in this. I mean, there's no point in making people redundant, because to be honest with you, I've been in the IT industry for almost 30 plus years, but I'm a qualified geologist. But I've run multi-million IT projects being a qualified geologist. So the IT industry absorbs everybody. If you have skills which are, which can be retrained and can be redeployed, then I think in the UK, we have to work at multiple levels. I'm very happy to share the NASSCOM contacts and bring NASSCOM and BCS together to make this a reality in the UK.
Thank you very much. Okay, Antonio, over to you to sort of wrap up.
Right. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Just going to ask for a round of applause for our panel, Joe. Yeah. Thank you very much. It has been an absolute pleasure. I just want to wish you a nice rest of your day. For people still in the room, we have some appetizers, not the ones in the room, but outside we have more. And I will welcome you to stay a little bit more and do a little bit of more working. Thank you very much for the people online, and I wish you a nice rest of your day.
Thank you. Thank you for organising it, Antonio.
Thanks, Antonio. Bye.
Bye.